Hey everyone, Phobos here, coming at you with another build guide. Promised this a few days ago. This is for the Scorching Ray Totem Trickster, and it uses Soul Mantle. I'm sure you guys are all surprised to get 3 totems, and yeah, I'll just start talking about the links and stuff, and then explain the gearing choices, and then go into why we chose Trickster. Trickster is pretty much the main part of the build, so that's going to be where the bulk of this is talked about, and then at the end I'm going to talk about like how you can vary your setups and stuff. So, elemental focus, scorching ray, efficacy, controlled destruction, increased burning damage, and then swift demise is going to be your 6th link. You can also use like minion totem elemental if you want your totems to be even more tanky, but I find that in most cases it's not necessary. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten a 6th link yet because all the ones that I like, there's nobody selling them on hardcore, and I could just rip the character, but I kind of want to play it for a bit. So yeah, and had really bad RNG with fusings. But that would be the 6th link, and this is the 5 link. You basically just drop Swift Decay, or Swift Demise, Swift Rapid Decay. I think that's what it is, yeah. So, that's the links. And then, in terms of the gear, we're using Soul Mantle now. Soul Mantle, you don't like need to use Soul Mantle ever, but it has pretty good synergy with this build with the Kikazarus, because this build is all about stacking life regen and having like an absurd amount of life regen. We're talking about like 1800 life regen or something like that, and the Kikazarus play a pretty fundamental part of that, because you get an insane amount of life regen per each of them, because you can get basically like, if you're level 90, you get like 90 per ring, which is kind of insane. So yeah, not only do they mitigate the curse factor, which is nice because you can run pretty much any curse in the game, you don't have to worry about curses at all, and they give you more damage in the sense that you can let your curses stack on top of you and then use a self-flagnation jewel to get even more damage, because the damage from self-flagnation is just general damage, so it does apply to Scorching Ray. So there's just a lot of synergy here, and that's why for this build in particular I would recommend using a Soul Mantle. Not to mention, just having 3 totems out is rather nice, because the whole issue with this build is basically it does really great single target damage, but the problem is that because all the Scorching Ray totems do stack, the real issue with the build is that how does it deal with trash, right? Because Scorching Ray, when you're playing it, it can deal with trash pretty well, because you can kind of just do a clean sweep of the trash, and the idea is that you're doing enough damage that the trash dies in like 1 or 2 sweeps. Now the problem with the totems is that they're auto-targeting, so they would have a tendency to kind of stay on a target, right, until the target dies, and that can cause a problem because it's just not efficient, because it's not like it's not as if you place the totem and it just does a slow 360-degree sweep around. That'd be really nice. It kills all the targets really quickly and stuff like that. It applies the enough stacks to get them killed. So having 3 totems is like really helpful to the clear speed, in my opinion, because it lets you cover more area, right? And the main question with this build was, can we get the damage high enough so that it can like reasonably kill trash relatively quickly? And I'd say that it was pretty much a success, because the damage and the ability is high enough that even if it locks onto like a white monster or something, it's going to kill it quickly and then start moving, and it does kill things pretty quick. So the totems still do rotate quickly. It's just like, obviously it's not as good as clear as like Freezing Pulse or something like that, but that's not really what it's designed to do, right? The worst case scenario typically tends to be when they get hung up on a rare mob or something. Like, it's fine if they're attacking the rare mob at the end of everything, right? That's what you want, because you want to kill the rares, obviously, but it sucks if they're like, pick out the rare at the beginning and kind of stick on it. But luckily it does so much damage that honestly it's not even that bad when that happens. So I guess the bottom line is that it's not like the fastest build, but it does really good boss damage, and it still clears reasonably quickly for a totem build. And just having Soul Mantle helps that, because you have an extra totem there. So not only are you getting more damage on mobs when the beams converge, but you're also just covering more area. So that's the whole thing with the Soul Mantle and Kikazarus. And then for the neck, I'm using Nagamahus now. You could just use a Marble Amulet, or any other neck, really, but if you're going to use something that's not Nagamahu's, I would use a Marble Amulet to try and get life on it. Try and get maybe like fire damage and spell damage, but you don't even really need that. This is just like the max damage setup, but arguably you're going to be more tankier, or going to be tanky, you're going to be tankier with just more life on the item, and then I think this is just like 3.1, yeah, 3.1 life regen per second versus with the Marble Amulet, you're getting like, what, 1.6% of your max life, so that's obviously a lot better there. You get more resistances on it and stuff like that, so you just lose out on a little bit of damage, but it's not really a big deal at all. For the shield slot, obviously there are better shields. This is just a nice cheap shield that is, it's kind of good in all the areas, right? So it has a res on it. It has 160 ES without quality. It has 55 spell damage. It gives you a bit of spell block. You know, there's just a lot of good things about this shield all around. And it's very cheap. It's like a chaos or something, I think. So, and just to go through the price of the items, this is basically a chaos unlinked. It's probably like 20 chaos right now. Like when you try and 5-link it. Like, it's basically just going to depend on the price of whatever the prophecy is, right? To get your 5-link. And then these are like a chaos, basically. This I got for 10 chaos. I kind of got this a little cheap. Normally they're probably a bit more expensive than that. But yeah, and this is a chaos, so it's all pretty budget, to be honest. And like I said, you don't even need this at all. You don't even really need a marble, which is like 10 to 20 chaos. You could just use like a high life neck. So, boots are actually pretty good, but we don't have the right enchant on them. The boots are pretty much just about filling out res and stuff like that. So, yeah. You can also use, there's other boots that give like immunity to bleed, which I find to be kind of useful, but you don't really need if you're using the flasks. This character's flask setup is just non-ideal right now. So there's a lot of other options you can go for boots, but you're probably going to need some res, so I kind of just like using rare boots. And I got a lot of life on these, so it was nice. The enchant you're going for is 2% of life regen per second when you've been hit. That's probably the best enchant you're going to get. You can't use the pen enchant, and you can't use the crit enchant because Scorching Ray doesn't crit. You can't use the pen enchant because this ability actually does not penetrate because it does not hit. So just keep that in mind. The Stygian Vise, this is a pretty good one. This is like, I think, 50 chaos or something like that. 40 chaos. Probably actually won't be as expensive when you start the league or something, but, you know, the price points of everything just gets really funky at this point. You don't really need anything as good as this, obviously, but it just makes getting resist easier, getting, what do you call it, elemental weakness cap easier. Speaking of elemental weakness cap, I believe it's actually like 91 or something with this because of how the Kikizarus work. You'd have to do like the math out yourself. I forget what the exact number is because I don't even remember what the actual elemental weakness number is. I want to say in red maps it's like 34, but I'm not sure on that. Could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, then the calculation's going to be wrong that I'm going to do. So, but I think it's around like 91 or something like that. So it's really easy to get early weakness caps, is my point. When using the Kikizarus, just another benefit of using them. Yeah, gloves are pretty good in terms of, what do you call it, just in terms of resist and life. It's mostly what we're looking for here. Obviously, you can use gloves like the 60 spell damage, 15% less or lower cast speed. The problem is that you just kind of like get fucked on resists, and cast speed is actually somewhat nice to have because it helps the rotational speed of the totems as well as it lets them stack up, because how Scorching Ray works is it stacks to 8, and when it stacks to 8 it does like more damage per stack, like a lot more per stack. So the faster you can get the stacks on, the better, and that's especially relevant in terms of clear speed. So taking away from your cast speed is not ideal, I would say. Even though you're not really like looking into scaling cast speed big time, right? So just a note on that. In terms of the scepter, so Doriani's would be like the go-to scepter. I think that's what I simmed this with. But I found this one, and it has like a lot of attack speed, and it was only 10 chaos. And Yeah, it's just nice because it's got like pretty much the same elemental damage as Doriani's, but with like what, like 10 more attack speed. And it's just the implicit roll is a little meh. But I think it's like what, 93 on the actual item and then 22 on the implicit. So you lose about like probably 10 from a decently rolled Doriani's. You're losing the cast speed as well, which is actually kind of unfortunate. Like Doriani is definitely overall better than this, but I'm just using this now because I found it and it's close enough. It was like 10 chaos. So if you can't afford a Doriani's, you can just pick up a scepter like this, and it probably won't be that expensive, honestly. It'll probably be a little worse than this, but it won't be too expensive. And then using Val's Vision. Now, this is a pretty underrated item. Not really underrated in the sense of price because it's pretty common, but I don't really see it used as often as I think it probably could be used. And it gives 31 fire res, a decent amount of chaos res, gives a pretty good amount of armor, and obviously light radius is kind of meh on a life build, but you get 12% of increased max life if no equipped items are corrupted. Regenerate 100% of life, or 100 life per second if no equipped items are corrupted. So as long as you're not using any corrupted items, this thing is pretty baller, and yeah, it just works out really well for the build. You get a nice, like you're getting like 300 flat life regen, like 400 basically when you count the stone golem, just from like your head, your rings, and your stone golem, and that's not counting any percent life from the tree, or and it's not factoring in your life at all. So, and keep in mind this character is only level 81, so the rings are going to give you a bit more, and then on top of that you're going to get obviously more life regen just from getting more life. Like this build probably caps out with this specific gear at like 5200 to 5.4k life at like 92 to 94 or something like that. If you're using more life-based gear, then like you can get the life value higher. You can get it closer to 6k. You can actually use like Comb's Roots or something like that even if you really wanted. Get like, I think I've had it in the PoB at 6.2k using Comb's Roots and just like very life-centric gear, sacking some damage obviously. And then you get like around 1900 life regen per second. In this current setup, we're probably looking at like around 1400 when our thing is active, when our Trickster node is active. And speaking of that, we're going to get into the Trickster node right now. So opening up the tree, I'll just give you a quick look at the skill tree. I'll link the skill tree in the description of the video, but it's pretty standard stuff. Now the main focuses of this build are actually on Patient Reaper and to a lesser degree Swift Killer. Now if you read this, you get the 30% increased damage over time, and then 70% increased recovery rate of life, mana, and energy shield if you killed an enemy affected by your damage over time recently. Now you're going to say, okay, but if you killed an enemy, right, and this is a totem build, so this is just a complete waste. But there's been an old bug. I'm not really sure if it's a bug or if they just can't fix it or if they think it's part of the game now or whatever, but they've never really fixed it, so also why I'm titled this character Abusive Game Mechanics. But yeah, so we'll just call it a bug because it seems like it might be a bug where when you kill something with damage over time, it's actually attributed to you, not your totems. And this was, I think, first discovered with Shockwave Totem, because what people used to have like stuff that would convert some of the damage to fire, and then it would put an ignite when it crit, and then sometimes they'd randomly get power charges when they were using Assassin's Mark, and they'd wonder why, and that's basically why. And this is basically taking that like nice little surprise, I guess, and just abusing the shit out of it, because Scorching Ray only does burning damage over time. So you're always getting the effects of these. So whenever you kill something, you're getting the 70% increased effective life, recovery rate of life, mana, and energy shield. And you're always getting the power charges and frenzy charges. So obviously this is nice because you're just getting a damage boost from this, right? And you're getting like more attack speed from the frenzy charges, so your shield charge better. And then this is pretty much the heart of the build, though, in that when you're killing trash in the map, you're actually super tanky because you have a retarded amount of life regen. Because if you look at the life regen, do we have our stone golem out? We'll put it out. Look at the life regen, we're at 650, and like I said, this is going to go up like substantially. And when we we killed recently, we get 70% of this value. Now, it actually doesn't show up, 70% of this value added on top. It doesn't actually show up here, but you can tell it's active if your ES is going up, or if this value changes. So if you kill something and this changes, you can tell. The reason why this doesn't go up is because of the wording. So if you look at the wording, it says recovery rate of life. There's actually not a particular stat for recovery rate of life. It's only life regeneration per second. So this doesn't go up in the actual like box here, but it does go up practically speaking, and this has been tested numerous times. You can even feel the difference yourself because it's obviously you're getting like a ton of life regen when it's active versus when it's not active. So yeah, that's how that works basically, and that's how you get like an insane amount of life regen with this build. And speaking of that, we're gonna go into the other thing you can do here, and this is with Pantheons, and it also covers the Ascendancy, and it's gonna also cover a link setup I have in here. So I'll go over the other skills that I'm using as well. Obviously, we've got Stone Golem. The Orb of Storms is for... You can't actually put proc Equilibrium with Orb of Storms because it doesn't do any damage, which is why we have Lightning Traps to proc Equilibrium. You don't really need to proc Equilibrium on anything else except bosses because everything else dies pretty fast. Maybe like a really high health rare like Essence Mob, stuff like that. But Orb of Storms is basically just to generate the... what do you call it? The elemental overload, as well as give you the arcane surge, because arcane surge gives you more spell damage as well as more cast speed. So that's what that's for. Obviously, the lightning traps are for equilibrium. You want a vol lightning trap as well for bosses. Don't have that in here, but something you should have. And then we have another setup here, which is Immortal Call, cast when damage taken, and Blood Rage. Now, what the purpose of this is to proc, where is it? To proc this Pantheon right here. So if you were to actually have this active, if you were to have that link set up active, you'd want to be using this Pantheon. And what you do is you basically kill the Toxic Sewers boss, which is the spider, to unlock the 50% increased recovery rate of life and energy shield if you stop taking damage recently. And this stacks with the Trickster stuff right here. The only thing is you don't get the mana recovery rate, but it's not needed. And what happens is, in order to proc this, we have cast when damage taken, Blood Rage, or Mortal Call. So what happens is, if you zone to the map, you can either just turn on Blood Rage right away, which is what you'd probably do, right? And then when you get hit, the Immortal Call proccing actually takes off the Blood Rage. And the thing is, it's immediately recast and put back on. But it does take it off for a split second. And what that means is that the effect from the Pantheon activates. So you get the 50% increased recovery rate. So your life goes up even more. So if you did the tanky version, the super tanky version, where you're like 6 point something K life, you're at 1900 life regen, you're going up by 50% of that. And then if you're at like the lower tanky version like I am, like 1500 or something life regen already, you're getting the 50% on top of that. So it's really powerful. The only thing is that because you're proccing it with Blood Rage, is that it's draining your mana, obviously, right? I mean, it's not draining your mana, it's draining your ES. Now, how do you fix this, right? So there is something you can do to make this work, because otherwise you're giving up your entire ES pool, and it's probably not worth it. So there's multiple ways you can go. You can either just ignore that Pantheon completely and continue using the Brine King one, which is actually fine because the Brine King one's pretty good still. You don't really need the extra life regen. But if you really do want to commit to getting that extra life regen, I think the route that you should go is you should take Zealot's Oath, okay? And Zealot's Oath converts all your life regen into ES regen. So basically your ES is going to be pretty much full the entire time, but now you have to worry a little bit about chaos damage, anything that's going to bypass your energy shield, right? It can make running like Desecrated Ground really annoying, but you could just not run that mod. So there's a lot of things you could do depending on how you want to tweak your playstyle. And it seems a little sketch running regen on 1200 ES, right? And that's why I would recommend, if you do decide to go that route, to come up here and definitely get Shade Form. I don't have this allocated right now because I'm not entirely sure which one I want to go, which path I want to go down. But I would definitely get Shade Form if you're going the route of using the Aracali Pantheon, because you're going to get 250 flat ES, which is just insane because you actually scale ES a decent amount. You get like ES here, ES from here, ES from here, stuff like that. So you're going to get a decent boost to your ES. I think my path of building, and I don't even have all my stuff qualityed, like this isn't quality and stuff like that. And if you get like actual ES boots, actual ES gloves, you can get a decent amount of ES. My path of building with like mediocre gear, I think, has around 1900 ES. And at that point, I think you'd be comfortable really swapping over to Zealot's Oath, no problem. And you're going to get pretty close to that once you take this node. So, yeah, you just have to worry about, like I said, like things that directly bypass your life. You also have like a decent amount of chaos res, but you don't really have like a lot of chaos res, right? You're only like minus 33. And realistically, the only thing that you're getting that you wouldn't otherwise get is like the chaos res and the helmet, so you don't really have that much. You could also run like a chaos regen flask or something like that. Or you could maybe run one of those elixirs where damage doesn't bypass your ES, because you do have a lot of room to run certain flasks here, because there's not a lot of damage flasks that help you. So you're mostly just running defensive flasks anyway. And that's because the like a Wise Oak flask gets penetration, and penetration does not actually penetrate anything because Scorching Ray is a burn. So just something to keep in mind there. But yeah, so that's kind of how you're gonna want to run the setup if you take Zealot's Oath, is you want to take Shade Form. Now you don't have to do that at all. You could just use the other Pantheon, like I said, not use Blood Rage. And then you can either continue to take Shade Form and have that ES buffer, or you can take like Weave of the Arcane and Walk of the Aether. Now, the movement skills don't cost any mana, isn't a big deal, but the 20% attack and cast speed is nice because you get more shield charge, mobility, and then you stack up quicker on targets because you have more cast speed. And Weave of the Arcane is just not terrible, right? It's actually pretty decent. And I feel like you're really just balancing the benefits of these two against like the ES and evasion you're getting from this. Unfortunately, a lot of the other bonuses are pretty conditional or fairly small. So it's kind of what you want to do there. But yeah, you can definitely make it work if you want to do the Aracali thing and just take this node and then take a Zealot's Oath. So that's something I'm going to be experimenting with. There's a lot of different ways you can play this build. And yeah, because like obviously we're looking for an automated way to proc the Pantheon. And that's why you pretty much have to use Blood Rage, right? Otherwise, it's not really worth it. So yeah, there's that. And I think that's pretty much it. In terms of like flasks and stuff, it's really up to you. I'd probably recommend like a Rumies and then a Basalt. The Basalt having an armor mod on it. And then you can run pretty much whatever you want. You're probably going to want a Quicksilver, obviously. You don't really need a mana flask. You could have one of those fancy mana flasks for like panic situations. Like you could have the one that makes your shit cost no mana, but probably not necessary. And yeah, I'd say it's pretty much the build. In terms of where you go after this, like I said, I'll link the trade, but you come down and get Arsonist normally, finish this Totemic Mastery, then you can pick up more charges here since you're going to be able to use them in Blood Drinker. If you don't want to pick up Blood Drinker, you can pick up Devotion. There's another charge right here. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with this build. In terms of the jewels, like we use Self-Lagnation for the curse stacking. We use Clear Mind because we keep all of our mana unreserved. And then after that, we're just using a Enthrallment. We're just using like a random jewel here. So not much to see there. Yeah, that's pretty much the build, and it's kind of a long one because there's a lot of mechanics and a lot of different ways you can build it, a lot of different things you can do. But I think it's a pretty fun build. It's pretty effective. It's not obviously like a top tier build, but you know, just fun to mess around with, fun to abuse these types of mechanics and think up something different. So hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll put out a demonstration video to follow very shortly. So thanks, and talk to you guys later.